Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, it is Thursday. Well, actually, it's not. It's Wednesday when we're recording this, but the first chance that you'll have to listen to it is Thursday. It'll be the day of the final game of the regular season. Joining me now to discuss not only the playoff schedule, but also the postseason team awards, Zach Dooley. How are you doing today, Zach?
Jesse, I am doing very good. Tired, a little bit, late arrival.
Sure. Yeah.
Last night from Seattle, and back-to-back 2 a.m. touchdowns do take their toll, but I'm doing good.
Before we get into the postseason schedule, I want to ask you a question about last night's Seattle game. Because when Seattle scored with 30 seconds left to make it 6-5, right? 6-5.
Yep.
I was left going like, is this funny or am I concerned? And I think obviously once the Kings won, the conclusion I came to was, no, that was funny. Not funny, ha, but funny like, what a weird game. Was there any sense once the game was over of like disappointment that it got close late, or is it just like, who cares? They clinched home ice. We knew it was going to be a weird game. Everybody's sitting. There's 2 games left in the season.
Yeah, I thought it was irrelevant personally, and no one seemed to be the slightest concerned, about it. Like that was actually one of the tougher travel back-to-backs I think the Kings have had all year too. Like Seattle and Edmonton are not near each other at all.
Well, and you have to go through customs, right?
And there's customs.
Yeah.
So it was a 2:30 arrival in Seattle, but that was 3:30 because of the time difference, right? You get the hour. So like and it was an 8:00 start in Edmonton. So like that was one of the tougher ones of the year. And I honestly I don't think that had they lost the game, anyone would have been upset because of you're resting a couple guys and where everything's at. But yeah, I didn't sense any concern, but everyone seemed, pretty happy to get the win. Obviously, you'd rather win that game than lose it, right?
Well, that game, I know we covered this on Kings Talk, and I've seen people talk about it on social media, but that game tied, for anybody who doesn't know, that game tied not only the record for most wins in a season in franchise history, but also the most points in franchise history, which means that in the Calgary Flames game, the Kings have an opportunity to break both of those records and set new franchise highs for wins and points, which, given where we were at the start of this season and given the list of, let's call them question marks that we laid out at the end of the season, and they were considerable. And I don't think it was just me. Like, I feel like everybody we spoke to admitted, like, okay, we don't know what kind of season Kemper's going to have. We don't know what kind of season, the blue line's going to have. Is Brandt Clark going to develop into a player? What's Gavrikov going to look like without Matt Roy next to him? Will Quentin Byfield continue his progression? What will Warren Fogle look like? Will they miss Victor Arvidsson? What's the Pacific Division? Like, given all those questions, for them to finish with the season that they had this season is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it really is. There were a lot of questions. I think a lot more than there were the year before. And it's funny, this team vastly outperformed that team. And I don't even think the answers to the questions, if you said, okay, here are all the questions. What needs to happen for this team to tie or set a franchise record in points? I don't even know if I would have said what happened. I feel like I might have answered questions differently than actually what happened. Like the answers to them were very successful, but it wasn't even like the path that I might have thought the Kings needed to take. So it's all come together, I think, better than we could have expected. And almost every question that was asked, I feel like the answer was on the right side of it, right? Like,
you want to hear a wild stat that I stumbled onto today quite by accident?
Love wild stats from you.
So I was talking to somebody, and it was a person outside of the organization, and we were just talking about the playoffs and whether or not the Kings have a chance at beating Edmonton, and we both agreed that they do. And the point was raised that the Kings are playing with a level of confidence now that wasn't there in the beginning of the season. And I said, yeah, sure. I mean, I suppose, but, and I went back on the schedule and I said, you look at the teams that they've beaten recently and they're putting up a lot of goals against teams that are in the lower half of the standings or teams that are scratching a bunch of guys. And I wasn't saying it to be dismissive of the success. I was just saying, like, it's easy to be confident and good when you're playing a bunch of teams that you should beat. And then I just thought, well, I wonder, because there are definitely players who have excelled in the second half of the season, point-wise, right? Like Kevin Fiala has way more points in the second half than he did in the first. I'm sure
Byfield
has, yeah. And so I thought, okay, well, was there ever a point in the season? Because there have been seasons in recent memory where they came on strong late. I think, was it 21-22 or in March they had that, like, just unbelievable
22-23, but 21-22 had a good run too.
Yeah, and so I just thought, like, okay, well, let's just look at the first half versus the second half. So I just sort of arbitrarily chose a day. And I think the day I chose was January 15th, because I think I determined that was the halfway mark for the Kings. So on January 15th, the Kings record was 24-12-5. Pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah.
Points percentage in the league that had them 6th overall with 6.646. And then I thought, okay, so then from January 15th to today, and what did I say? 24-12-5?
24-12-5.
Yeah, so since then, the Kings record 24-12-4.
Yeah.
It's identical. Like, if they lose to Calgary in overtime on the final game of the season, it will be exactly the same for the first 41 games as it was for the second 41 games.
Now that's crazy.
That's nuts. That means that essentially from the start of the season till the end, the Kings have been, exactly. And I'm not trying to take credit for this, but when they were on that 6-game losing streak and some people were freaking out, and I would go on Kings Talk and just say, listen, the team is what they are. They prioritize what they prioritize. They're good at what they're good at. They're bad at what they're bad at. They went on 5-game, 6-game winning streaks. They went on 5-game, 6 games losing streaks. I'm not worried about it. They are who they are. And I think that might be the one thing about this season that's the most shocking looking back on it, is that they really just have been who they are really from the start. And I have to assume that's to Jim Hiller's credit.
I think so, right? And I think you look at that date, it is 41 games, and it's like right at the front of that was when the Kings had that really tough stretch of games. And then now, since the deadline, it's this great stretch of games, but it all evens out, right? And it's just that, it's when they do lose 5 in a row, which happened in that second half of the year, it's like, it's never that bad.
No,
it's never that
but
bad.
It was also preceded by a 5-game winning streak, followed by a 6-game.
And it was probably never that good too, right?
Yeah,
like on the 5.
right.
And it's just, but overall, when you win twice as many games as you lose, it's probably more so the good than the bad over the course of a season. So I do think there is a belief in what Jim Hiller has instilled here. And I think maybe it wasn't there in October because it was an unknown. And as proof of concept has developed, and as relationships have developed, and as this team has developed, they're playing with that belief, right? I think you can definitely see it, and it's just not. It just feels a little bit different than it has certainly last year, but even the couple years before that, it feels most like 22-23 of the 4 years that the Kings have made the playoffs. But it even feels maybe a little bit better than that.
Yeah, and I had this conversation on Kings Talk after the Seattle game, I think, and I'm just throwing out ideas here. We'll get into the schedule in a second. Me, I like to have opinions on all sorts of things that don't necessarily require me to have opinions about them. But one subject that I literally don't have an opinion on, and it's just a question that I think about a lot, is what makes a good coach? Because, whatever sport you want to point to, you can say, okay, well, the coaches that succeed over time have good players. And you go like, okay, sure, obviously. But like, you look at Phil Jackson, right? With what did he have, 11 NBA titles or something? And you go, well, sure, he had Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant and Pau Gasol and blah, 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 blah. And you go, all right, but he was the one who was able to make them mesh and da-da-da-da-da-da. But then you go to, like, since we're talking about the last 3 seasons of Kings hockey, you look at a guy like Todd McClellan, unquestionably considered a good coach. But because we had to sit there and watch him lose to the same opponent, I guess it was only 2 years in a row for him because he got fired. But because it was such a talking point of like, the 1-3-1, which was such a small percentage of what the team actually did. But if your weaknesses are exploited in the same way by the same people repeatedly, even if it's just twice, and you and I know if something happens twice, it might as well have happened a million times.
Yep.
Then I don't know. If you have something that can be exploited, even if it's difficult to exploit, and even if only one other team in the league can exploit it, does that make you a bad coach? Does that make you a coach with an obvious flaw? Like, everything's got flaws. And I was just, as I was logging on for this call, I caught a glimpse of NHL.com, and their front page is, here's a dozen Coach of the Year candidates. And I was like, well, they can't all be. Like,
that's over a third. Like, they can't all be.
They can't all be the best coach of the season. But then you look at it. Teams. Yeah, but then you look at it and you're like, okay, well, does Jim Hiller deserve credit? And you go, all right, well, I can see the argument, but by the same token, the Kings are not the President's Trophy winner. They're not even in second, but I think they might be the 6th best team record-wise. So why shouldn't the Stars coach, the Leafs coach, the Golden Knights coach, the Capitals coach, and the Winnipeg Jets coach get more considered? I don't know. Like I said, I don't have an answer, but it is a curious thing to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really is. And ultimately it's never about one person, right? It's not just the players and it's not just the coach. It's the symbiotic relationship, right? Hopefully they're both on the same page. And it really seems like with this group that everybody is.
Yeah. So speaking of pages, let's talk about the schedule, because I know people, including my family, are very curious about when the games are going to be played, and people want to plan their lives, myself included, around these dates. So what do you know about the upcoming schedule for the NHL playoffs?
We got some good information today, which put out, when you hear this, would have been yesterday afternoon on LA Kings Insider, but the one game that we don't know is the first game.
Right.
That'll be either, of course, right, Sunday, April 20th or Monday, April 21st, TBD. Comes down to a lot of different factors. Now, following along with the Montreal-Carolina game, it looks, as of right now, that the Canadiens will get at least a point from this game and will secure that final playoff spot, which does nothing to actually determine when that game will be. The Montreal scenario had the Kings playing either Sunday or Monday. If it was Columbus in that spot, the Kings for sure would have played on Sunday. So we'll have to remain vigilant to see how it shakes out. It's all TV stuff, right? TV dictates it. And when you have a prominent Canadian market in the mix, I'm going to guess that it complicates matters further for when the Canadian market wants that Montreal team to play.
Yeah.
But what we do know is game 2 will be Wednesday, April 23rd. If it gets to a game 5, that will be Tuesday, April 29th. And if it gets to a game 7, Saturday, May 3rd. Games 1 and 2, 7 p.m. starts at Crypto.com Arena. No matter which day for game 1, it'll start at 7. Wednesday, the 23rd, game 2 will also start at 7. I don't have the formal game dates in Edmonton, but if you piece things together, you can probably do the math on when those dates will be. But for 3.5 solid dates here at home, then should know when that game 1 will be within, I would think, like 24 hours.
Yeah, and I'm assuming, like you said, that it just depends. Assuming that Montreal winds up winning or taking a point away from this game that they're currently playing against the Hurricanes, they would clinch a playoff spot. And then I'm assuming it's about Canadian TV wanting Montreal or Edmonton.
That's what I think. Yeah, exactly. When do you want the Canadians playing?
Because if Montreal didn't make it, wasn't the option then that would lock in whatever.
That would lock in Sunday.
Yeah,
it would have been Kings Oilers Sunday,
right?
Game 1, 7 p.m. And Montreal. I don't fully understand how that works now. As we say that Carolina just scored.
Oh yeah,
3-2. But Montreal, it was not Monday guaranteed. It was either or. So there were still some things to be worked out.
Right.
So it'll either be an extra day between games on the front, or 2 days between games 1 and 2, and then we get a more regular series schedule from there.
When I saw the notification that game 2 would be Wednesday, April 23rd, and game 5 would be April 29th, I was a bit not paying close attention to what I was reading and thought that it said game 3 would be on April 29th. And I thought,
and you're like, what is going on?
Yeah,
here?
it's like, why are we putting 6 days between games 2 and 3? That's absurd.
That is obscure.
That's way too much. But all right, so there you go, Kings fans. If you want to come to any of those games, and you should want to, those are the dates. So if you were waiting, wait no more. Obviously, we still don't know about game 1, but Sunday or Monday. Either way, I'm going to be there for game 1. I'm barring some sort of collapse of my health in the next few days. And obviously, for selfish reasons, I think everybody hopes that it's Sunday. But we have to wait and see. Hopefully, by the time you're listening to this, it will have been decided. So if you're hearing this, go check and see if it's been decided.
Definitely possible. And it is Easter. So I guess maybe if you're an Easter celebrator, you might not like it, but maybe you would. Maybe Easter is a morning holiday, and then
that's what I was just going to say.
So,
I'm not an Easter person, but I always felt like, isn't Easter a morning thing? Like, aren't you done by the early afternoon?
I personally hunt eggs in the morning.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously. So
and isn't it like
good to go for the game?
I always felt like it was a brunchy, lunchy kind of.
Yeah,
holiday.
That was how I always celebrated.
Yeah. Right.
So either way, Sunday or Monday. Hope to get that confirmation soon.
All right, so then let's go ahead and talk about the end of season player awards. There's only 4 of them that the media are allowed to vote on. Before we get into it, I'm not going to ask you to tell me the names of the players, but I'm going to ask you to tell me how many different players you have winning the 4 different awards.
So just the media 4 awards, I had 3 players.
Okay, I had 4, and I specifically chose 4 because I wanted a chance to talk. I'm assuming my vote didn't sway any awards, and I just felt like I wanted to recognize more than one player, because there's a version of these awards where you only name 2 players.
Yes, I agree.
And I didn't want to go that route. So I guess we will start with the LIbby Memorial Award, which is the MVP. No, you know what? Let's go backwards. Sorry. Let's start with the best defensive player. And you know what? I'm jumbling it here. Let's start with the best defenseman. We'll start real specific.
I selected, or do you want to go first?
Yeah, you go ahead.
I selected Vladislav Gavrikov.
I did as well. I'm glad we agree on that.
Now, I think there are 2 very legitimate arguments to be made. Mm-hmm. Vladislav Gavrikov, Mikey Anderson.
Sure.
If I could have joint named them for the work they did in the first half of the year, I might have done it. I might have considered that joint tandem as team MVP for what they did in the first half of the year. But I was not allowed to do that. And I think you could make a very good case for Mikey, as you can for Gabby, but I went Gavrikov. He was tasked, I think, with a harder job of moving to the right side when Doughty was out. And I thought they both elevated their game for sure, but I went Gavrikov with that as kind of my decider.
Yeah, it's funny. I went with Gavrikov over Anderson, primarily on the switch from the left to the right side. And also he was asked, not specifically, but by switching to the right side and playing alongside Anderson, he was the de facto replacement for Drew Doughty.
Yeah.
And that's a fairly large weight to place on the shoulders of a guy who, like I said at the beginning of the episode, heading into this season, what's Gavrikov going to look like without Matt Roy? You know, like when he was acquired 2 seasons ago at the trade deadline, or last season, I guess, technically at the trade deadline, he came in and there was a lot of, article writing about Gavrikov shouldn't be viewed as a primary trade target. Look at these numbers in Columbus. He's a second pair guy. Blah, 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 blah. Then he came in, was paired with Matt Roy, and was dynamite. And it was like, oh, wow, this is sort of a perfect tandem. And then Matt Roy was allowed to walk in free agency. And there was some question as to, well, will Gavrikov be as good? And then Drew Doughty went down, and it was like, well, what are we going to do? And I don't think they switched him to the right side immediately, right? Like, it wasn't game 1. It was like game
No, it was like
3
game
or 4.
5.
Yeah. So they did it, and, you know, I think everybody rightfully was a little bit, is that going to work? And it not only worked. What does he have? I think he's a plus 27 on the year.
It's his numbers are excellent, right? And you look at some of the underlying numbers for like stick checks and zone entry denial, and he is a top 5 dude in the league. Not even just best on the Kings, but Mikey Anderson up there as well. But he is, among the best in the NHL.
And there have been plenty of nights where on the broadcast they have singled him out as the best defenseman on the roster. Yep. And I just thought, you're right. It could have gone a number of different ways. But I just felt like based on expectations, the role he had to step in and fill. And at the beginning of the season, if the conversation came up, do you extend Gavrikov and how long an extension and how much? I think at least some people would say, I'm not sure. Let's not make this into another Matt Roy situation. Now I think most people are looking forward to an extension. And I mean, he played himself into that spot, and so good for him. And I don't know how much impact this actually has, but with the acquisition of Andrei Kuzmenko at the trade deadline, the Kings, correct me if I'm wrong, the only 2 Russian players on the roster, Gavrikov and Kuzmenko.
Those would be the 2. Yeah.
I've got to believe that it makes Kuzmenko a little bit more comfortable having someone there who he can speak to in his native language. So not that should factor into the defenseman conversation, but it's not nothing. Let's go ahead then, since we both agree on Vladislav Gavrikov. Let's move to the best newcomer.
Okay. I voted for Warren Fogle.
As did I. So far, we're 2 for 2.
Now, I had a qualifier. Similar to you, I didn't want a 2-person awards ballot.
Right.
And Darcy Kemper has played here before.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. But yes, that is
true.
So
on a technicality, I did not include him. And I just wanted to highlight Warren Fogle because that dude deserves some highlighting for what he's done this year, right? He's got 24 goals, 46 points, 23 of his 24 goals at even strength. He's a top 15 player in the NHL in 5-on-5 goals per 60. He has just exceeded all of my expectations. And I was very high on him coming in. I liked his profile. I thought it was a good value contract. But I don't think I could have predicted how just impactful he would be here. Like he is just an LA Kings player, huh? Like he just plays the game the way that the LA Kings play the game, and he has been such a good fit here.
This probably shouldn't be considered in the best newcomer part, but I like you, I didn't want to just have it be Darcy Kemper winning 3 different awards, and then we just talk about Darcy Kemper for
right.
We'll get to Darcy Kemper, don't worry. Warren Fogle is the kind of player, and I've said this time and time again, but if you're going to be a contender in any sport, you're going to have excellent players at the top of your lineup. That's what makes you a contender. If you don't have, star players at the top of your lineup, you'll get beaten in the first round or the second round, or you won't make the playoffs. You'll just be a team that comes within a point or 2. And even those teams have star players, right? Like the worst teams in the league, you can point to 2 or 3 other guys and go, "Oh man, what if that team made the playoffs?" That guy, but they don't have depth. They don't have the players like Warren Fogle. And, you could see, and I hate to go back in franchise history, but you look at the teams in 2012 or 2014, you go up and down the lineup and you go, okay, was Drew Doughty better than the best defenseman on every team they played? Well, I think so, because I'm a Kings fan. But was he? I don't know. Was Jonathan Quick better than every goaltender they faced? I don't know. Was he better than Roberto Luongo? Was he better than Henrik Lundqvist? Was he better than Mike Smith? I think so. I think it's not even debatable. But in the grand scheme of long careers and everything, yeah, there are people who are going to say that Roberto Luongo was way better. But what you can't argue with me is that Jarrett Stoll, Dwight King, and Trevor Lewis were better than every other team's third line. You just can't. And, Henrik Sedin and Daniel Sedin, well, I guess I can't remember which of them was injured for most of that series, but whatever, who cares? It's a long time ago. Too bad, Vancouver. But, when you'd go up against these teams that had one or two stars, okay, well, we have one or two stars also, and they'll match each other. But then our third line, our fourth line, our third pair D, our second pair D, they're going to be better than your guys. And they're going to play better than your guys. And Warren Fogle has come in and, is he going to get put in the Hall of Fame because of his numbers? No. What did he have this year? Or the season's not even over yet, but he's got in the mid 40s in points, and mid 20s in goals.
46 points, 24 goals.
Yeah. If I went to, Toronto and started talking about a player with those numbers and started talking about him as, an MVP candidate, you'd laugh me out of the room. Like that's just not, but that's not his role. His role, was tasked with playing a very specific role. And he was shuffled around from line to line, right? He started out on that line with Byfield, Fiala, and Fogle. Then I feel like he's played on, I don't think he ever played with, did he ever play with Kopitar and Kempe? I don't think he did. Not for an extended period.
For stretches, but small, like in-game stretches, maybe a game here and there.
And I don't think he was ever on the fourth line.
Not that I can recall.
But the lines were jumbled so much so that it's like, even though that sort of technically means he only played on the second or third line, because of the combinations that were mixed and matched, he did wind up playing, with different players. And I just thought, it's funny. I didn't think about Kemper as having been here before. But I really liked Warren Fogle, and also just big moments, the right moment, big, like you said, he's just a perfect Kings player, and the hair and, all of it.
Why did you pick Warren Fogle? Well, the hair.
I mean, listen, it's as good a reason as any.
Sure is.
He just had himself a real good season, and replacing, it's silly because he's not really replacing Victor Arvidsson in terms of expectation of production. Victor Arvidsson's best season as an LA King, he had almost 60 points. But it was, not exactly a one-for-one swap, but especially with Fogle winding up playing alongside Deneau and Moore, which is coincidence, not by design, I imagine. And especially with them going up against Edmonton, which is where Arvidsson went. I don't know. The whole thing just, it makes a real nice story. So that's why I went with Warren Fogle.
No arguments there.
All right. Perfect. The next award, let's go with Best Defensive Player.
So I had Darcy Kemper here.
I also had Darcy Kemper.
Okay, so we could talk about Darcy Kemper here.
We're three for three, and I'm assuming you had him as the MVP as well, then.
I doubled him up as the MVP. Okay. Yeah. We could talk about, why you might disagree or why you pick somebody else.
I mean, it really boils down to wanting to talk about.
Fair, and that was probably the easiest way to do it. And I would have a guess at who you had in the MVP slot.
You'd probably be right.
Yeah. But like, what a season, huh? Like this dude's he certainly should be a Vezina finalist, and probably won't win it because what Connor Hellebuck's doing is insane. But like, Darcy Kemper deserves to be a finalist, right? I was looking up the numbers. He's top 3 in the league in goals against average, save percentage, and goals saved above average.
Yeah.
So whether you believe in the regular numbers or the fancier ones, like, he's there. And it's him, Hellebuck, Vasilevsky, I think, in all 3 categories, or for the most part, it's those guys. He's just been outstanding, right? I think the numbers speak for itself. I think watching him speaks for itself. What a season he's had. And you got to feel confident having him between the pipes going into that series against the Oilers.
Yeah, and I think somebody posted. I can't remember what the exact stat was, but it was number of times in franchise history that the Kings have had a goaltender with more than 30 wins. And I think it had happened 6 times in franchise history, which is rough. And, it's funny. I thought this was common ground. Like, I thought that this was known history, that the Kings' history of goaltending is bad. There's really been 3 goaltenders in franchise history. It's Rogie Vachon, it's Kelly Hrudey, and it's Jonathan Quick. And a lot of that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just interesting to say that the history is bad when it's like Hall of Famer, potential Hall of Famer,
2-time cup winner.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't remember how many years Vachon or Hrudey played here. Quick played here for 15 years, give or take. But the franchise has been around for 56 years, and the problem is that in between these long stretches of big goalies, the goaltending has been bad. And I mean, no disrespect to the guys who played here, but it just was. I don't want to make the argument that Darcy Kemper's season this year is the best season in Kings history as a goaltender, because obviously Jonathan Quick in 2011 and 12 is the one that immediately leaps out to mind. I'm sure Rogie Vachon probably had some outstanding seasons. But it was a real good season, and it's certainly in the conversation for one of the best seasons by a Kings goaltender. And it would be really easy to dismiss it by saying, well, he played for a team with an excellent defensive structure, or he played for a team with outstanding defensemen. But as much as I like this team, as much as I like the way this team plays, is anybody really going to propose that Mikey Anderson, Vladislav Gavrikov, Joel Edmondson, Jordan Spence, Brant Clark, and fill in the blank are, missing Drew Doughty for 50 games? Like, is this a blue line that, would back a Dominik Hasek to a Vezina trophy? Like, I don't, they have done their job, and they've done it they've done it really, really well. But Darcy Kuemper has also done his job. There was a goal against, was it Colorado? There was a goal he allowed recently. Maybe it was against Seattle the first time when Seattle beat them 2-1. But I heard somebody say that's the worst goal Darcy Kuemper has allowed all season. And I didn't even think it was a bad goal. I just thought like he got beat clean on a nice shot.
Anytime you look at a goal and you're like, maybe that was savable, it's like you remember those because it's so few and far between, it feels like, right? And
I just thought that's what a wild statement in game 78 or 79 or whatever it was, to say that was the worst one that he's allowed all year. And what was the stat? 16 games in a row, 2 or less.
Yeah.
Not allowing a goal in the first period in 15 games in a row or something like that. Those are numbers that you can throw out, and it's really easy. And what I think the last time somebody did one of them was like the 50s or something, and you go, okay, that's impressive. But for a team that as Jim Hiller admitted doesn't score a lot, not allowing a goal in the first period, fairly important. And what's their record? 41-0-2 presently going into game 82, and they score 3 or more. Some of that's goaltending. You score 3 and you're unbeaten in regulation. That means your goalie's doing his job. And so, to be clear, the award is best defensive player, but it can be awarded to a forward, a defenseman, or a goalie. And so, like I said, I wanted to get Darcy Kuemper an award, and I didn't want to go with MVP because part of it, we can talk about it in a second, part of it is I just feel hinky giving goaltenders MVP awards because like every team's goalie is their MVP. But yeah, Darcy Kuemper deserves something for this season. And I agree he should be a finalist. The way that the awards are actually done means that he might not be, and there'll be nothing to be done about it. And I'm not the first person to say this, but I think if he had played more games, he'd have had more chances to pad the wins numbers. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it actually matters, but I feel like that will wind up mattering in the Vezina voting.
We could We could drop a played more games or played for a different team, but we probably don't have to go into that one, right?
Yeah. 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 If he played north of the border or on the eastern seaboard. Yeah. So that brings us then to the Bill Libby Memorial Award. You gave it to Darcy Kemper. And then I'll just let you guess who I gave it to.
So I'm going to explain why I gave it to Darcy Kemper.
Sure.
And then I will circle back to who I think you gave it to. We'll see if I'm right. Now, if it was a first half or second half MVP, I would not have picked Darcy Kemper for either, because in the first half, I would have had it between two guys, Adrian Kempe and Andre Kopitar.
Uh-huh.
And in the second half, I would have had it between two guys, Kevin Fiala and Quentin Byfield.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that all four of those guys had really nice years. And I thought that the Kempe Kopitar pair drove the bus first half. I thought the Fiala Byfield line drove the bus second half. And I think you gave it to Adrian Kempe because I think he was the most consistent over the course of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's deserving. He probably would have come next for me if I wasn't allowed to go Gavrikov Anderson as a pair. But I gave it to Darcy because I thought he kind of had the more balanced showing between the two halves, whereas I kind of thought that you could say maybe Adrian Kempe was the third best forward in the second half, and that's still so awesome. But that was why I didn't go with one of the forwards.
So I did go with Adrian Kempe, partially because I don't like giving goaltenders MVP awards, partially because I didn't want to give the same award to two different people, or one person, two different awards. But also, at this point in Adrian Kempe's career, for him to have gone from a guy who was labeled as streaky and, is he a center? Is he a left winger? No, he's a right winger. He's the top right winger on the team. He's right wing one. He scores 35 goals this season. The season's not over yet. He could wind up with more. But, 35 goals, 38 assists, 73 points, plus 22, only 36 penalty minutes. He can kill penalties. He can play on the power play. He plays even strength. He's big. He's fast. He's got an unbelievable shot, but he also makes plays. He's the last man back on defense sometimes. And when there's a 5-man power play, he's the sort of de facto defenseman on the ice.
And it is an electric factory.
Yeah. I mean,
he's back there.
Yeah. And I mean, I just think he has become so good that it demands recognition. So
I got no arguments too, because I think even if you said, hey, maybe best player on a good team, I think that probably is Adrian Kempe for me, and I think he's had another awesome year. I'm huge. I just think he's such an impactful player. I certainly couldn't argue with that pick. Like he's that deserving.
Yeah. The rest of the awards given out at the end of the year are sort of up to different organizations, and so I didn't even bother to think about who might win them or who might not. Do we want to go through them? Because then I'll have to look up what awards we didn't cover.
So the ones that are, community service and that kind of thing, I don't usually have much of an opinion on because I don't know, and I defer to the people who do.
Right.
The only other one would maybe be, unsung hero.
Yes, which is up to the players.
We don't vote on, the players vote on, but we could kind of have our thoughts on who would be based on who we sing about as people who create content about the team or who we see other people talk, I had a thought on that one, but that was probably the only one that I had was I thought Joel Edmondson was probably deserving.
Okay.
I think of all the newcomers, I think his impact has been really, really big on this team.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he gets talked about maybe the way that a Fogle does. And Fogle maybe deserves more of that talk. But you see all the guys who get talked about, especially when you consider the public sentiment about Joel Edmondson when he was signed, it was extremely negative. And to see the way that he has fit in and played, I feel like maybe he hasn't gotten his due coming back the other way, right? You get people who have stopped threatening to jump off of a cliff because the Kings signed him, but maybe not enough the other way of like, this dude's been a pretty effective player. So that would have been my pick there. But that, like you said, not our pick to make.
No, and we said if something happens twice, it might as well have happened a million times. This will be the second time in a decade that Trevor Lewis is on the roster and doesn't win the unsung hero for consecutive seasons. I could have that wrong. I don't know. Maybe I think he was on the roster in 2018-19. Anyway,
he won a lot of unsung
He won a lot of them.
In his time here.
The Joel Edmondson one, that's a good, I like that pick because I feel like I've been talking about him all year long, but I've been talking about him mainly because I'm still fascinated at how many minutes he wound up playing.
Right.
And so I would constantly bring it up, but I definitely wasn't. And the fact that he led the team in plus minus with some absurd number, was it plus 37 or something?
He was high.
Plus 36, or no, Warren Fogle, excuse me, is plus 36. Joel Edmondson,
I think he's like plus 28, something like that.
Plus 27, tied with Gavrikov. Yeah. Now he's played 72 games this season, which is the most of his career, which is another absurd number. Any update on Joel Edmondson? I feel like I shouldn't be asking you. I should be asking Jim Hiller, and he can say no updates. But
none in that. He didn't play last game, but none in a good way that there's no threat to him not playing game one against Edmonton. I mean, could he play tomorrow or today when people are listening? I think it's a possibility for sure. Get him back in, but also if he doesn't, I'm not worried about his status for game one. I think he'll be good to go without much issue.
Now, there was one player that we haven't talked about, or maybe we mentioned him in passing, that I thought about for a minute or two for best newcomer, because he's literally the newest comer. And that was Andrei Kuzmenko. And the only thing that stopped me from voting for him is that he's only played, I don't know how many, 21 games, I guess, so far. It'll be 22 at the end of the season. And I just thought, well, that's almost a little too cute by half to name him the best newcomer. But I do have to say, of all of the additions the Kings made this season, Darcy Kemper got a shrug from me. I mean, I was just happy for that trade for reasons we don't need to go into. I almost didn't even care how Darcy Kemper played, but I thought, he'll play fine. I didn't know he was going to play this well. Tanner Jeannot for me was a kind of a shrug, and it was okay, well, he's probably not going to be the player he was that one year in Nashville, but he'll probably play his role. He played it great, fine. Warren Fogle came in. I liked Warren Fogle. I liked the way he plays, but I didn't think he'd have the kind of season. He's okay, fine. Joel Edmondson, I was curious how it was going to turn out because I saw all of the negative reactions. And while I didn't necessarily initially side with them, I didn't have my own opinion. And so I kept reading all these people talking about what a terrible move it was. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Maybe it is. It turned out great. Andrei Kuzmenko, I didn't have any idea or opinion or thoughts. I was just like, oh, okay, third rounder for this guy. Okay. And I didn't see anybody else with any strong opinions either. Everybody's attitude seemed to be, well, it didn't cost anything really. So let's find out. And what we found out was, that so far he's been dynamite. I think he's got 17 points in 21 games. And most of those have come I think all of them came in the last 14 games.
7 without a point. Yeah. And then since then,
he's been on fire.
Over a point per game.
Yeah. And there were immediate comparisons to Carter and Gaborik, which I initially really didn't like. And now I think, I can't remember where I saw it, but somebody put all their 3-point totals up next to each other after the trade deadline. And Kuzmenko's, I'm pretty sure, has dusted them. Or if he hasn't dusted them, it's maybe Jeff Carter had, I don't remember. But at any rate, he's on fire. And every game you're looking up and you're like, oh, another assist for Kuzmenko, another 2-point night for Kuzmenko, ho-hum. He's improved the power play. He's improved the top line. He's improved it. He's playing so well that the second line is getting points. Right? Fiala and Byfield's numbers are through the roof since they got Kuzmenko. I think Byfield actually has the most points on the team since the trade deadline. And he doesn't play with Kuzmenko. but I think it is at least tangentially related to the matchup difficulties and the balancing of the lines and all that stuff. So it's like, if a rising tide lifts all boats, Andrei Kuzmenko has been that tide for this LA Kings team. And it's for a guy that I almost had forgotten existed and came into this team. And I was just like, okay, well, where's the harm? Let's see how it goes. He's a UFA at the end of the year. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It costs you a 3rd round pick. You can recoup a 3rd round pick pretty easily. You can sign a guy in an off-season year and then trade him in November for a 3rd round pick. Like, and that's not EA Sports GM mode talking. Like, that is almost routinely done. But man, he's been really good. And so I considered him for best newcomer, but I didn't vote for him.
He's been really, really good. And his presence has made the power play look exponentially more dangerous. I mean, I think it's clicking right around league average, maybe a little higher now with the game last night since he came in. It's in the low 20s, which we've saw it be below 15% before that. So that's a big, big upgrade. It just looks better, like it just looks more dangerous when he is out there. It puts other guys in different spots, and him being there, that right shot, makes me feel kind of like it did when Velarde was here and he played that role. Like, both guys have these hands that they could stick handle in these tight spaces, and they see passes and plays that were not being made earlier this year. He's been impactful with Kopitar and Kempe. I think both of those guys have seen an uptick, and the 3 of them have gelled really well. But what I've been most impressed by, and those are the things that if it worked, those were the areas you knew he'd be good at, right? Like you knew he would be good on the power play. You knew he would be good 5-on-5 offensively. His buy-in, we talk about that, right? It's been so high. Like you see him on the back check. You see his commitment to playing all over the ice. That I did not expect at all. I expected this to work if the offense worked and the power play worked. Didn't expect his fit to be that strong overall, based on everything you had seen and read, right? So that's been really impressive. Think about how good his 21 games had to be for you to even be suggesting.
Yeah, well,
that he'd be in that mix,
and let's be
impressive.
Totally clear, because every time we talk about how he didn't have points in the first 7 games, there's always some acknowledgement that he improved the team, even though he wasn't putting up points. Fine, but in the 14 games after those 7 games, that's what I'm really talking about. Is when the avalanche of points started coming, where you just go like, oh my god, this guy won't stop putting up points. I want to backtrack real quick to your point about the power play, because I find this sort of amusing. So since the trade deadline, the Kings power play is clicking along at 23.4% and is 15th overall in the league during that stretch. However, here are the teams who have better power plays than them since the trade deadline who are not making the playoffs. The Pittsburgh Penguins, 33.3%. The Nashville Predators, 28.3%. The Utah Hockey Club, 26.7%. The Buffalo Sabres, 25.5%. The Vancouver Canucks, 23.5%. So you remove those teams out of the which teams have the best power play since the trade deadline. It's a much shorter list. The Kings move up it quite a bit.
And there's still, the power play is never going to be 2, right? Like but if it can be middle, that's enough. If it can get the right middle, like if you can go 1 for 4, but that one's a big goal, that's the power play doing its job. You don't want to be in a game like the game in Edmonton where it's 8 power plays for the Kings and 6 for the Oilers, because even if it's double in the Kings' favor, that's still not the game they want to play against that team. But if it can just get a little bit of production at the right times, it can be impactful.
And I've said this before, I will say it again. I know lots of other people have said it, and it just bears repeating. I do think the Kings can beat Edmonton in this upcoming playoff series. I think if the entire series was played 60 minutes of 5-on-5 every night, I think the Kings would win the series.
Yeah.
But I'm terrified of the special teams matchup. And that's purely a function of last season, where the Kings went over on the power play, and I forget what Edmonton was. They were 45% or something on their power play.
They went a lot for a lot.
Yeah, so I mean it's just recency bias. It's just me being scared of last year. And like you said, if the right team scores the right power play goal at the right moment.
The Oilers are good. Oilers are good. Like, and they have two guys who you can play good and they can still get you. And that is scary. Like, those two guys are so good that the Kings can execute as intended. And you can say the Kings played a good game and those guys can still beat you. Yep. And that is always going to be the scary part of playing Edmonton, is those guys are that good and they have good complementary pieces. I don't think they're as deep as the Kings are top to bottom at all. I think the Kings have the edge in that area, but those guys are so good that they can beat you no matter what you do. And that no matter how good you feel is still there.
While we've been talking, Montreal did in fact defeat Carolina. So they clinched the final playoff spot in the East. And that means that the Kings now officially playing either Monday or Sunday night. Apologies for not bringing any clarity there. But again, go ahead and check as soon as you can if you want to go to game one, because it's going to be very soon.
Yep. Very soon. Hopefully we get some clarity on Sunday or Monday soon. Now that this is locked in, I imagine they can get their TV stuff done and come up with an answer here sooner rather than later.
Now, I meant to ask you this before we started recording. Apologize for popping it on you now at the end. But do we know when the official team awards are announced? Usually it's at the end of the last game, right?
Those should come. You're listening to this on Thursday today. So those will come out at some point today. Might even be this morning. I'm not sure exactly when.
I am fully expecting Darcy Kemper to sweep all of the awards that he is eligible for, which is, again, part of the reason that I didn't vote for him. Apologies, Darcy. You've had a heck of a season. And if he does wind up winning 3 of them, I think he's perfectly deserving. But I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Yeah, exactly. Listen, we're going to have so much to talk about over the next couple of days. I'm just going to wrap it up here because we're going to be talking a lot. I'm going to be at games 1 and 2. So Zach, thanks for joining me.
Jesse, thanks for having me.
And thanks for listening, Kings fans. Keep your ears open, because on top of Kings Talk after every game, we'll be doing all the Kings men will be increasing its episode production load more than just 2 a week. We'll be doing post-game episodes. I don't know. My health will have a lot to do with it, and the scheduling will have a lot to do with it, and availability, but there'll be a lot of episodes. So keep your eyes and ears open, and we'll talk to you soon.